here. I welcome on behalf of Broadband India Forum. Good morning to all ladies and gentlemen. Myself, Debashish Bhattacharya, Senior DDG Broadband India Forum. With proud privilege, I welcome each and every one of you to this special virtual session of the Digital Dialogues on Framework for Building an Inclusive Digital Society for Rural India. This dialogue is presented to you by Broadband India Forum, and the event partner is Bharat Exhibitions. The moderator for today's session will be myself, and the rapporteur for the session will be Mr. Abhijit Panikar, Deputy Director, Research at Broadband India Forum. It gives me a great honor to welcome Dr. Renuka Rameshan, President of the Association of Sign Language Interpreters, and her colleague, Mr. Saurav Roy Chaudhary, to do the sign language interpretation for this session. As you all are aware that in our drive to promote accessibility in the digital communication space, we at Broadband India Forum have introduced sign language interpreters for all our webinars. Let me give you a brief profile of Dr. Renuka Rameshan first. Dr. Renuka is the president of the Association of Sign Language Interpreters, ASLI, India. Dr. Renuka Rameshan holds a PhD in social work. She is a senior sign language interpreter / trainer with an experience of over 20 years in the field. Currently, she's also an executive member of the Indian Sign Language Research and Training Center, ISLRTC. Her colleague, Mr. Saurav Roy Chaudhary, a brief introduction. Mr. Saurav Roy Chaudhary is the member of the Association of Sign Language Interpreters, ASLI, India. He is a freelance sign language interpreter. He has done his master's in extension and development studies and is proficient in English, Hindi, Bangla, Indian Sign Language, and American Sign Language. Before we start the program officially, there are some housekeeping announcements that I wish to announce. All speakers are requested to please keep their mics on mute if they are not speaking. Keeping your camera on is a matter of personal choice and convenience, except when speaking. However, in the event of loss of bandwidth, my personal experience has been that switching off the camera seems to help. While sharing a screen, please put the presentation on slideshow mode. Finally, for our esteemed speakers, since this is a virtual event, sometimes there may be a lag due to bandwidth or otherwise. So please keep the pace of your presentation adequate. Last but not the least, I would urge all the speakers to be time sensitive, to keep within the allocated time slot, so that it creates better experience for everyone who is a part of the session today. With these housekeeping rules out of the way, let me now invite Mr. T.V. Ramachandran, President Broadband India Forum, for his welcome note and introductory remarks. Before I invite Mr. Ramachandran onto the dais, let me give you, ladies and gentlemen, though he needs no introduction, I would read a small short profile of his. Mr. T.V. Ramachandran, also popularly known as TVR, is an esteemed industry veteran. He has been a part of the mobile telephony sector in India since its very inception as the first CEO of Sterling Cellular Delhi, and having established and led COAI, Cellular Operators Association of India, for 12 years. Recipient of the Voice and Data Lifetime Contribution Award for Mobile Telephony in India, Mr. Ramachandran is also Honorary Fellow of IET London and IETE India. With these few words of introduction, I would now request Mr. T.V. Ramachandran to take the floor. Over to you, TV sir.
Thank you, Debashish. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Like Debashish has welcomed you all, but I would like to say once again, a very good morning to all of you privileged guests. Welcome to the session of Digital Dialogues, which is about inclusive digital society for India, for rural India. I would also like to begin by extending a special warm welcome to our respected and esteemed expert chief guests and guest speakers for the day. Chief guest, Shri Hariranjan Rao, Administrator, USOF, Department of Telecommunications, Ministry of Communications. We could not have hoped for a better chief guest because Shri Hariranjan Rao leads all the initiatives for connecting rural India from the government and the entire sector. Special guest of honor, Dr. Rajit Kathurya. He is Professor Dr. Rajit Kathurya. He is the Dean of School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Shiv Nadar University, and Senior Visiting Professor of ICRIA. I have the honor to know Professor Rajit Kathurya since 1997, when he came in as a senior economist at TRAI 1, working with the great Dr. Harshvardhan Singh, who was chief economist there at that time. So I know him from those times. It's a great honor to have him here for this. Mr. Osama Manzar, founder and director, Digital Empowerment Foundation, is also our special guest of honor and a great friend of the sector for getting connectivity to all the unconnected in the rural areas. Dr. Manasi Kedia, warm welcome to you also, madam, as a special guest of honor, research fellow, ICRIA. Warm welcome also to Dr. S.N. Gupta, treasurer, BIF, my colleague as office bearer and chairman of the BIF Rural Digital Initiatives Committee. I shall say a few words about that further on. Welcome again, all my revered industry colleagues, valued attendees, and ladies and gentlemen. BIF is totally committed to the cause of rural digital inclusion, digital inclusivity in all forms, like we even have sign language interpreters here for this today, and for broadband connectivity ever since its inception in India, when BIF came in 2016. We have a dedicated Rural Digital Initiatives Committee, which we call the RDI Committee, working actively towards facilitating inclusion for all and empowering our vulnerable and weaker sections by enabling access and opportunities through digital platforms and services. It's one of the core ethos of the BIF's charter. This committee, RDI committee, ever since its formation, has been aggressively pursuing this objective. In fact, way back in 2016, in the first RDI committee, which was chaired by the industry veteran, Mr. K.V. Seshasai, had created a consortium to take a holistic bouquet of services to the rural areas to create the pull for broadband. Because unless the pull is there, all the supply efforts will fail. And this remains relevant even today. Maybe the time has come for that consortium now. At that time, probably we were too early. Maybe under Shri Hariranjan Rao, this may happen. We will work actively for that. Presently, our RDI committee is being led by Dr. S.N. Gupta, also known as NGN Guru. He has been the father of NGN in India. And we know him since 2005 when he led us in ITU, even to Bangkok to talk about NGN there. He is now the chairman of the board of Bluetown India, which is very much into rural connectivity, and BIMSTEC, South Asia, chairman also of Bharat IPv6 Forum. So any aspect of connectivity and broadband and NGN, you mentioned it, he's there in that. He's a colleague and old friend with rich experience in the ICT sector, having been part of TRAI as advisor, part of British Telecom, STL, and many other industry honorary and leadership positions, which he continues to hold and add value to. His venture, Bluetown, is prominently, like I said, into rural digital connectivity and reflects his passion and digital approach to the area. In fact, he was one of the key movers for the creation of the report on rural digital connectivity, which we are discussing today. The report as such, as you all know, was released by none other than Sri Rajiv Chandrasekhar, Honorable Minister of State for Electronics and IT, at the high-level roundtable in the valedictory session of India Internet Governance Forum, the first ever held in 2021. More about this later, and I will not steal that thunder. All the big experts are there to talk about it. I would not say more about the paper. It is, however, interesting to note, I wish to point out to you that even, I think, Dr. just yesterday at the CII interactive session, the Honorable Minister of Communication and IT, Sri Ashwini Vaishnav, one of his key comments which he pointed out for the industry action was to prioritize reaching out to connect the unconnected. He talked to the over 60,000 villages where there is no connectivity. He talked to the forest areas, the tribal areas of the country, etc. He said, please go out. If you want to help us, please go out and connect them. That is his mission. This is clearly underlines the vision and approach of the government. And we from BIF assure you all that our core mission is to support and serve in this area. I will not take up any more time about all these things. I've been exhorted by my colleague Debashish to be within time. I will thank you for your patient hearing, but now I also have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Manasi Kedia to present the highlights of the BIF ICRIA report on building an inclusive digital society for rural India. Let me briefly introduce her to you. My privilege for that, Mansi. Dr. Mansi Kedia is a research fellow at ICRIA with over a decade experience. Her areas of research include telecommunication policy, trade and industrial policy. And we from BIF have worked with her in many of these assignments. She has published several papers and reports on telecom and internet regulations, impact of IT, industrial policy in India. And her ongoing research includes issues related to internet governance, competition, and other allied areas in mobiles handset industry, internet shutdowns, and future of work in India. She's really got a very exciting range of subjects to always to work on. In fact, just before we started talking, we were talking about how there is never a dull moment in telecom. It's always something exciting to do. By the way, she's also associated as a member of the task force rewriting something completely different, which is a direct tax code for India, which was formed up in 2017. So thank you very much, Mansi, for being here with us. We look forward to your presentation about the highlights of this paper. Over to you, Mansi.
Thank you, Devi sir. It's a privilege. I'll quickly share my screen. Is this visible?
Yeah, right.
All right. So let me just begin by quickly thanking BIF again, one for collaborating with us on this report, and also to give me the opportunity to present the findings of this report yet again. I'm presenting on behalf of the team that worked on this report. A lot of effort went in from the team, including Professor Kathurya, who's on the panel. In fact, I was just telling everyone before we started that I'm presenting amongst people I've actually learned telecom policy from. So it's also comforting, but at the same time, a bit unnerving. But let me get started with the presentation. The topic was building an inclusive digital society for rural India, and the key word was inclusion. So we started off the report by trying to understand what we meant by digital inclusion. And very often, when you talk to people or in common parlance, it's understood as access. But digging deeper, and I think now how we understand inclusion, it does also include aspects of adoption, which is digital literacy, and application, which is contextualizing digital adoption to local uses in terms of education or healthcare or e-governance services. We adopted a definition that was available at the University of Maryland and picked up these three different levers that are independent, but yet interdependent in terms of how they facilitate inclusive digital societies. I was thinking we could draw a parallel to financial inclusion. When we talk about financial inclusion, we talk about people having bank accounts, so access to banking. But does that finish the process or the purposes of financial inclusion? Perhaps not, because are these people, especially women, we know, are they able to really use their bank account? There's so many stories of zero balance bank accounts, because you've opened the bank accounts, but people are withdrawing money and they're not using it. So the purposes of financial inclusion, just as they go beyond just opening bank accounts, similarly for digital inclusion, it's not just about connecting people. It becomes even more important that we look at these three levers, which are independent yet interdependent in the rural context, because a lot of things that we take for granted in urban areas in terms of ability to use devices, the ability to afford devices, content in English language versus vernacular languages are not so easily available. That ecosystem needs to be created altogether. And that is why we're looking at these three pieces together, which, like I said, we are working, the government is, the private sector is, everyone is working on these three aspects together. But when policy is devised looking at these three simultaneously, probably the outcomes are likely to be better. I'm sorry about the small font on the side, but this is the best I could do to get all the numbers together in a single slide. We try to draw up a status of digital inclusion in rural India across states and union territories. And we divided these indicators into access, adoption, and application. For access, we were looking at a lot of the BharatNet initiatives in terms of service-ready Gram Panchayats, Wi-Fi hotspots installed in Gram Panchayats, rural teledensity, rural internet users, rural smartphone users. All of these indicators are specific to use in rural areas. Similarly, for adoption, we have indicators like skills, ICT skills related to copying and moving content, browsing on the internet, sending emails, the status of the PMG Disha program, and then application, which is related to an e-governance index that we have, and also in terms of the connectivity to CSCs, which are government-driven digital kiosks that allow for certain digital applications. There's a lot in this one chart, so I'll leave it for everyone who's interested to look at the report, but there are one or two things that I want to highlight. If you look at the column on GPs covered through CSCs, you see uniformly green. Like most of them are green, which means that in terms of the CSC's reach, and I'm not saying how effectively the CSCs are running, but at least in terms of their availability and their presence, most GPs have a CSC presence at the moment. And on the other hand, if you look at data on broadband connected schools, it's probably uniformly red, which is, which shows dismal connectivity to schools and other public infrastructure such as hospitals. You can see the red along the entire column across different states. And then there are, of course, other indicators where there's a mix of green, red, yellow, orange, basically showing that some states have done well and some states haven't done well. The logical next step was to look at what states had done. Why had some states done better and why had some states not done so well? We carried out a case study for about 7 or 8 states in our report. And it was a mix in terms of how they were represented geographically, in terms of regional representation, and even in terms of the development approach that they had adopted. So I can say very comfortably say that they were along a continuum when there were states operating completely or almost independently in terms of the policy and the implementation of digital infrastructure and digital inclusion initiatives. And then there were others that were working alongside the central government in trying to achieve the objectives and the policies that were envisioned and laid out by the central government. So, and both approaches have their limitation. For example, when we spoke to officials from the West Bengal government, and we were talking about digital adoption, they said the CSCs are present, but there is no coordination with the state government. So we have set up the Bangla Sahayata Kendras, which are effectively CSCs also, but state CSCs. And this is largely an outcome of the lack of coordination. So you have duplicate centers and duplicate infrastructure initiatives, therefore not being the best outcome. In Tamil Nadu, from what we heard from the officials at the time of doing the report, was a deadlock on BharatNet. The tendering process was not smooth, it was rejected, they went through multiple rounds, and the state developed its own infrastructure, and not necessarily, and if you go back to the graph, even the access to Gram Panchayats on Tamil Nadu from BharatNet shows a 0%. So not ideal again. In Madhya Pradesh, which was largely the central government driven adoption of BharatNet, what officials told us was the quality of infrastructure is relatively poor and the connectivity is inefficient and it doesn't reach the houses. The last mile connectivity is very poor. They did a sample survey for their phase 1 connectivity, and of the 40 villages or 40 Gram Panchayats that they actually went to, they found that only one.
40 mile, the last bit, could you repeat? I missed that a little.
So in Madhya Pradesh, the state officials did a sample survey of about 40 Gram Panchayats, and they found that only one was receiving proper connectivity. I'm going to slow down just so thank you for that interruption. So what we figured was the best outcomes from for BharatNet and for other central government initiatives and development outcomes at the state level was ones that saw a lot of coordination between the state and the center. And a great example, two great examples were Maharashtra and Haryana. And what we see in their outcomes was quality infrastructure. These were state-led models. So they were able to deploy high quality frontier technologies in terms of the architecture, the network architecture. They had moved from, so Haryana was moving from linear to ring. Maharashtra had already done that. These were future-proof technologies, much better.
I'm sorry, Dr. Kedia, Haryana was moving from, what was that?
Linear to ring architecture. From
linear to?
Ring, circular. Linear to ring architecture. And these were also states that had started to think about strategies to monetize and utilize their BharatNet infrastructure. So it hadn't stopped at just building the infrastructure, but also thinking about how to monetize this infrastructure, how to utilize BharatNet infrastructure, which is extremely important, as you'll see in some of the other case studies that we did, the reasons why some of the centers are lying dead and have not, and even if they were connected, not being used at all. Even in terms of the digital adoption parameters, these states are amongst the highest. And if we go back to the previous slide, you will see that a lot of greens there in the digital adoption parameters. So our sort of conclusion came out that states which are working with the center, but still leading the development and inclusion process, have seen the highest or the most updated societies, digital societies in rural areas. A very important part of the success has been the role of the private sector. And this is across all three levers, whether it is access or adoption and even applications. T-Fiber, Mahanet, examples of world-class network infrastructure. In digital literacy, we have Internet Sathi, We Think Digital, philanthropic initiatives of the private sector that are complementing the work of the CSCs and PMG Disha, working along with the government and the community. And finally, in terms of building last mile connectivity, TV sir spoke a lot about Mr. Gupta's initiative, Blue Town. Airtel has also done some work related to Wi-Fi and building last mile connectivity. And digital adoption, there's a great example from Sterlite, STL Garv, where they've built digital access points and also equipped these kiosks with digital devices. So we cannot deny the role of the private sector. They bring efficiency, they bring expertise, and the implementation is also fast-tracked. So the government must recognize that we can, in fact, involve the private sector. And the BharatNet Phase 2 did talk about public-private partnerships. Let me quickly end by talking about the policy recommendations. I won't say that all of them are new, but there is some merit in repeating recommendations in actually having them seen implemented by the government. We have some general recommendations across access, adoption, and application. The general recommendation, as I finished off the last slide with, is involving the private sector and improving collaboration between the state and the center. While policy is driven at the center, a lot of work needs to be done at the state. And having worked closely with the DOT in the last couple of years, I know that that initiative is being taken very seriously under the broadband mission. On access, there are a lot of recommendations, but a few that I want to highlight is the role of alternate technologies to complement fiber. We thought that it was something that rural development is often network infrastructures of too much emphasis on fiber and fiber connectivity, but there is a role for alternate technologies and a lot of new ones at that, not limiting it to satellite. Future-proofing network design and allowing for last mile connectivity, thinking about utilization and monetization. Let's not just stop at building the infrastructure. While you're building the infrastructure, let's think about how are we going to monetize. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. A lot of work already happening on the ROW policies, but needs to be carried forward. There's still bottlenecks on alignment with the central government laws. Improving supporting infrastructure in states and union territories. It's not only going to be with telecom infrastructure. Electricity needs to be improved. Other sources of infrastructure need to be improved, not only for establishing the network, but also for utilizing it. Standards development and adoption for network infrastructure. Some work happening in 5G related to that, but it continues. There needs to be continued focus on rural specific infrastructure. And one interesting idea that came out from some of our literature review in foreign countries was specific spectrum assignment targeted towards rural rollouts. So there's some discussion on that in the report, and we can get back to that later. In terms of adoption, a lot of work needs to be done for digital literacy, especially in terms of bridging gender and regional gaps. Also, the digital literacy programs, as we see it in PMG Disha, is largely, the curriculum largely associates using of devices. How should one email? How should one use social media? How should one browse? Very important aspects of cyber security and managing your cyber use need to be included in the digital literacy program. We need to make cyber experiences safe and sustainable. So literacy programs should not be just about knowing how to use devices. And if you even look at adoption parameters, there's a lot of green in browsing the internet, but even basic functions like copying emails, like copying and pasting or attaching files to emails are some things that states rank very low on. There needs to be some more work on the digital literacy curriculum, especially also in terms of integrating them to the K-12 program. It's happening a lot in urban schools. I can say that for my own children, but in villages, if it can be integrated with the education curriculum along with numeracy and language skills and digital skills, at least for the next generation, we are likely to be more ready. Finally, in terms of applications, a lot of local effort, I think, is necessary. Building with the community. Trust, we found, was a major factor that determined adoption of digital devices, digital content, digital applications. And the trust building happens when the community is involved in building the application process. And I'm sure Osama will talk a lot about this, that we don't want content being pushed out from outside to rural areas, because it often doesn't resonate with them. And there are examples of the Poshan application that for Anganwadi workers, they were not able to use it either for language barriers.
Could you please spell that? I'm sorry, Dr. Kedia. Could you please spell that?
Anganwadi?
No, before that.
The contextualizing content development.
No, ma'am, you said that there was a specific course which was going for the Anganwadi, some word you mentioned.
The Poshan app, the Poshan. It's a Hindi word, Poshan app.
Achha.
The Poshan app for
Poshan, like nutrition.
Poshan, yeah, like nutrition, yeah. The Poshan app for Anganwadi workers, why they didn't see an uptake? Besides the affordability issue, there were also issues related to the content and the way it was designed. So let me stop here and I can come back for any clarifications, but look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much, Broadband India Forum, for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mansi Kedia, for that excellent presentation and analysis of the report, Building an Inclusive, Digital Inclusive Society for Rural India. Thank you so much, which hinged on the pillars of access, adoption, and applications. Thank you so much. With this, we move on to the next part of our program, wherein I have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Osama Manzar, Founder and Director, Digital Empowerment Foundation. Before I hand over the floor to Mr. Osama, I would like to introduce Mr. Osama Manzar to all of you. Mr. Osama Manzar is a Senior Ashoka Fellow, British Chevening Scholar, and International Visitors Leadership Fellow of the United States Department. He founded Digital Empowerment Foundation, which has digitally empowered more than 25 million people in India and several more in the global south. He has served on various committees at MeitY, MIB, CII, and served in boards of APC, World Summit Awards, World Wide Web Foundations, A4AI, Down to Earth, and many more. He's the author of several books, including Internet Economy of India and 15 Years of Internet in India. With these few words of introduction, I now hand over the floor to Shri Osama Manzar. Over to you, sir.
Wow. Feels like I should work with Mike Bass. I am Osama Manzar. I'm going to speak. I'm very unhappy with Mansi. She spoke everything that I was supposed to speak, and I have nothing left to speak. So I have to actually do a stand-up comedy at the moment. You know, I was going through the report that Rajat and you all have written, and all the charts and graphs and everything. I wanted to. I have 10 minutes, right? Okay, thanks. So you know, I just want to bring that entire report that you people have written from inclusivity perspective of creating an inclusive digital society, which is absolutely important. I just want to bring 4 aspects to this discussion, and all those 4 points that I want to bring is from the perspective of those who obviously all of us want to be included. I just want to change the mirror from considering that inclusion, because which started from 2003 when Kofi Annan announced World Summit on Information Society that we need to include, and that has been almost 20 years. And we all know that we wanted to have an inclusive society, which is very aspirational, which is very positive. I want to just turn it around on thinking everything from the perspective of exclusion. And the reason why I'm saying is that if the Internet Access Index can be converted into an Internet Exclusion Index, and if you look at it, and the reason why I'm saying is because never before 5 years before, being excluded from internet was fatal or negative. Because earlier, if there was no internet, there was some alternative. If there was no connectivity, there was some alternative. Paper was an alternative, walking was an alternative, going to somewhere else is an alternative. But gradually we have progressed in such a way that we have made most of the things availability through information infrastructure, which is digital. And therefore, even the brick and mortar access is through digital now, whether it's food or water or health or anything is become, and especially after COVID, it is very clear that most of our essentials are accessible only through internet connectivity or digital connectivity or digital infrastructure. So if we look at it that, okay, if I'm not going to give it, we are actually harassing people. We are actually making them excluded. We are making their basic rights violated, their entitlements not delivered. And so therefore the necessity to achieve inclusion must be rapid. And the reason I'm saying is that if you look at your report, one line is the most significant line, which is out of the graph where there are 3 lines, the one line which says urban internet penetration, one line says the middle path or means, and the one says rural internet penetration. I want to stick on that line of red line. I would like to convert that line as a below internet line, or from below poverty line, because it is the people who are below poverty line who are more than 400 billion. And if you Prime Minister himself announced and said that we are feeding 800 million people every month through ration supply. Who are those 800 million people? They all are lining up to check their biometric accessibility, authenticated, and then get their food or ration. Why are they lining up? Why are they going somewhere else to get authenticated? And why they have to get authenticated? And if at all they are going to get authenticated, aren't they spending extra money to get authenticated? Aren't they spending extra effort? Are they walking miles away to get those food or anything that they are entitled of? So it is very important to see, and you have yourself has written, and this report has written the framework. If you look at the application framework, it says very clearly education, it says very clearly health, it says very clearly gov. But I would like to expand. It should go to finance, it should go to agri, it should go to, even more. And actually, that is the line that contextualizes that these are the areas. That means when you say education, that means you say 1.5 million schools, which doesn't have a broadband, which doesn't have a telecom line, which all lives in rural areas. So suddenly your entire education come into subject. And then I say, if it is a subject, then why telecom is a telecom? Why not education department is responsible for connecting those and take telecom in their own hands? So therefore the another line of scoping or the policy suggestion is that isn't this time that IT and telecom should be a subject, interpersonal subject of each of the 29 subjects of the country? They actually drive it. It should not be left on the decision making of telecom and BharatNet or something. We have been seeing BharatNet for 15 years. We have changed so many ways BharatNet. That itself is a historical book of itself. That means we are making connectivity reach, but we are not making that wire convert into a bandwidth for my house. So that means actually we don't need a new technology. Actually, we don't need any new policy. We need only one thing: how to convert your fiber into a functional data delivery system into my hands. And that's the reason why we are always looking for mobile, because mobile with the SIM delivers data. But that corner panchayat building, which has got BharatNet, connectivity, is with the 4 lines of Wi-Fi, which doesn't deliver data. And that is a huge issue for us. So, and that doesn't require technology. That simply requires service delivery system. How do we convert that? So this application linkage with adoption and with access is actually need a very, very strong service enablement of this telecom in terms of the bandwidth to get converted, because people are capable of converting contextual content. People are capable of knowing how to use available bandwidth, whether through YouTube or whether through Twitter or whether through, any application that the government through the stacks that they are delivering or anything. If nothing is available, they make their own audio content and video content. There are enough. So contextualization of content and contextualization of context is not an issue. Issue is making service enabling access infrastructure in such a way that where the fiber breaks, how do we make that a household item. It's like a nalka in my house, like the way I open a tap, like the way I switch on a light. Is something that is not happening, and it's not happening for quite some time. And the reason I'm highlighting it is that we are looking at this entire approach very much from a singular eye of top-down and telecom-oriented approach of providing access. It's very, very important that like if the mohalla builds its own road, if it is not being built by the NHAI or Pradhan Mantri Sadak Yojana or something like that, because otherwise we are really, really getting excluded. And this exclusion is fatal. It's human rights violation. And it's my human rights now, because thankfully, e-governance went very, very fast, and it converted most of the thing to become digitally enabled, which is great. But digitally enabling everything is actually becoming risky for me and highly paid for me. And I want to repeat what I always say is that I don't want to pay 250 rupees for a page of print. I don't want to walk, 20 miles to with 100 rupees cost of and 1 day of wage to lay off to access a single service that is only and only dependent on something. And all this I am saying from the Suchnapreneurs that we have in the ground that are keep working. They are minting money only through financial services and e-governance services. That means they are in demand. That means we have made that work for them. So if it is available with connectivity, it will work. Why we can't convert that is an issue of serviceability. So my contribution in this discussion is that how do we, your data and everything information that you have laid out in this inclusion society that you are foreseeing that we should have, is subject to a single line that can we convert telecom and access broadband into a service oriented integration into the lives of the people through the 29 subjects that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Osama ji. That was an excellent, a very innovative and a thought-provoking talk for 10 minutes. It has probably opened the minds of many, including mine, to think afresh regarding the whole connectivity conundrum that is there and which is a challenge for the policymakers. Thank you once again. Can't thank you enough for what you have, the discourse that you have made. Thank you. We move on now to the next part of our program, and I have the privilege and the pleasure to now welcome Dr. Rajit Kathurya, Dean, School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Shiv Nadar University, and Senior Visiting Professor of ICRIA, to take the floor. But before he does that, I would like to introduce Dr. Rajit Kathurya to all of you, though he needs no introduction, and our TV sir has already introduced him in his opening remarks, but still, for the sake of formality, I will do that. Dr. Rajit Kathurya is the Dean, School of Social Sciences and Humanities, Shiv Nadar University, and Senior Visiting Professor of ICRIA. He has 20 plus years of experience in teaching and another 25 years of experience in economic policy, besides research interests on a range of issues relating to regulation and competition policy. He has worked with a number of international organizations, including the World Bank, ILO, UNCTAD, Lime Asia, World Bank, and ADB. He's also worked with TRAI, as was mentioned by TV sir, a founder member of Broadband Society for Universal Access. He's on several government committees, the Research Advisory Council of SBI, and has served on the board of Delhi Management Association. With these few words of introduction, I now hand over the floor to Dr. Rajit Kathurya. Welcome, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Debashish, for that warm introduction. And I feel as if I'm reaching the end of my career. I hope not. I hope this doesn't sound the death knell of my career. Osama was annoyed with Mansi, मैं भी बहुत खफा हूँ Osama से, because I was thinking while Mansi was making her presentation, I was thinking, what is it that I'm going to add? And then I thought about exclusion, and Osama has gone ahead and spoken about exclusion. So I'm going to think on my feet and try and make some remarks on the report. Is absolutely sort of spot on what Mansi has said about access, adoption, and applications. And I think I have nothing to add there. But based on what Osama said, let me try and add some value, because I don't want to repeat what has already been said. Let me try and add some value. So I think both have identified, both the presenters have so far identified that access is a necessary and not sufficient condition. And I think we've been saying this for at least a decade now, if not more. You need to get people to use the system, use internet, use mobile, use data applications. And if you recall, all of you are familiar with telecommunications and its sort of baptism in India, which was tumultuous, which was that when mobiles first came in, you had a rental of 156 rupees and a call charge of 16 rupees, 80 paisa, and incoming also had to be paid for, etc., etc. All that folklore now. What was the outcome of that? The outcome of that was pretty much that you had a lot of access, because 156 rupees at that time did not make access unaffordable. But what made usage unaffordable was the fact that the price of calls was exorbitantly high. And I think therein lies the lesson. And I think that lesson has been repeated by Mansi. That lesson has been repeated by Osama. And I think we need to sort of address that, whether that can be addressed through pricing, subsidies, content creation, public-private partnerships. I think, well, we need to really address that, because that's the elephant in the room. Even if you give access in rural areas, you're not going to get usage unless people find that usage to be useful, to be worthwhile, and that makes a difference to their livelihood. So I think usage is absolutely important. Let me give you my experience recently on how powerful usage can be. I'm now in a university which also has a lot of philanthropic activities. You might have heard of the Shiv Nadar Foundation. And recently, I actually had the good fortune of visiting some of the schools that have run by the government, government schools, primary schools, around the place where I'm located right now. And there are about, hundreds and thousands of schools in Uttar Pradesh. I'm located in a place called Dadri. And Dadri has several villages here. The district is Gautam Budh Nagar. So I visited a few schools in the villages around where I am, where the Shiv Nadar Foundation has actually provided digital intervention to enable learning. Now, you can imagine that these schools are minimal. There's minimal infrastructure. They have a midday meal program. There are Anganwadi workers there, and there are teachers, government teachers there. The schools are typically from class 1 to class 8, but Shiv Nadar Foundation is providing digital intervention for class 1 and class 2, and they've reasoned why this is important. And I attended a couple of these classes of children in these schools. All they provide is a sort of a dongle, digital connectivity, where often there is no digital connectivity, and that's the point that Osama and Mansi have already made. So they provide a dongle, they provide a laptop, they provide a projector and very good speakers, Harman Kardon speakers, so that the sound is attractive. And they've converted the state level textbooks into digital content. And so the teacher is standing there and doing mathematics, doing algebra, arithmetic, and doing alphabets in Hindi and English with the with the click of the mouse. So the digital content comes alive. There's very nice music. There's very nice graphics. And all of this has been done, as I said, by the foundation. And here are the children, there's a teacher who's facilitating this conversation, but they're being taught these simple things, language, Hindi, English, simple arithmetic, through a digitalized means. And you're already providing access because you've got a dongle and you've got wireless content, but you don't need wireless because the content is already built into the laptop. And I saw the experience of these children, and it was quite amazing. It's not the dull classroom that I had imagined when I went in to that class where children are sleeping, they're talking to one another, although my sample is very limited. But it was a classroom that was alive. Kids, these are people who are born in deprived and very, very humble backgrounds. And they are absolutely sort of riveted to the screen. They're asking questions. They want to do things on the content, on the sort of laptop. If they're asked to solve something or find the sum of 2 digits, they want to go up because there's interaction also possible in this mode. So, I mean, this is the power, and I'm planning to, I hope over a period of time, I'm able to collect enough of this evidence and point out that, digital interventions that are innovative can have a big impact on the learning outcomes of students. And these are, children of class 1 and 2, and this will stay with them for the rest of their lives. And it will also enable them to become more confident, enable them to explore much more than they do. So they're actually learning, and digitalization is making them more, is providing an incentive to learn more. And I think there's a power here, and I'm going to try and spell this out much more in the future through some research that I'm hoping to do, that we are hoping to do with the foundation. But this is, I think, will address the problems that the ASAR reports constantly talk about, that learning outcomes of children are very, very poor because they're not interested in doing simple textbook learning by rote. And this provides a way to for interactive learning. And I think it's a very powerful tool. The other point I wish to make, there are 2 other points that I wish to make, both of them very provocative. But this is, as I said, this is, let's think about how to get digitalization going in the country. One is data collection. And I think it should be made absolutely system driven. Get the politics out of data collection, make it system driven. Everybody must be incentivized to provide data. Every time, we at ICRIER or somebody else wants to do research on telecom, you have to try and, recreate that data set. I mean, that is time consuming. It wastes a lot of time. It's inefficient. And I know that Mr. Hari Ranjan Rao has some ideas on that, and through the associations, through broadband and through the telecom associations like COAI, there is an initiative out there which will make data collection systemic rather than recreating databases every time you want to do something. So that is extremely important. It's a large topic, but I just want to make that point. And I think Mansi and the team have already discussed that several times with DOT, but I just want to emphasize that we need to make that systemic. Two more points. One of them especially, I would say, is provocative. Both of them are provocative. One is on spectrum assignment. I think we have to get rid of this auction method somehow. And I'm not holding a brief for operators here. I know there'll be lots of vested interests amongst operators as well who want to create barriers for others to come in, etc. But I think try and get this Mickey off our backs and say that that the Supreme Court said that this is a natural resource and it has to be auctioned. I think auctioning has resulted in very, very high prices. Can we think of alternative ways to assign, transparently assign at reasonable prices so that the operators don't all spectrum, and it becomes an alibi for them to provide poor quality service. So let's try and catch the bull by the horns and see whether we can assign spectrum at a more reasonable price. I mean, extraction is the easiest thing to do, for the government. they can always jack up auction prices. You can continue to have an auction, but try and conclude the auction without having these extractive prices. And the last point I want to make, which is perhaps even more provocative, which is that the national telecom policy, the new one, we've had 94, we've had 99, we had 2018, I think, and we had one in 2008. I think it's already sort of lived its life, I think. And the reason it's lived its life is because not because it wasn't future looking, it was because it did not anticipate COVID. And we need to have a telecom policy now that internalizes the fallout of COVID on the digital sector. And I'm making this proposal to Shri Hari Ranjan Rao, who's here, is that think of a new telecom policy which internalizes the fallout of COVID. We know, I mean, there's so much of evidence that COVID has changed the environment of telecommunication. And it's going to become, if it was thought to be an input into other facets of life, including production services, livelihood, citizen services, etc., it's going to become even more. And I think Osama had referred to it in his remarks as well. So, and it's I think going to become, to use a bad pun, it's going to become endemic in people's lives. Digital connectivity is going to become endemic. It's a bad pun to use, but let me use it. And therefore, I think there are some good points that the policy has, but let's formulate a new policy so that it can become not only future-proof, but also it can become any other disease or pandemic-proof, because we haven't seen the end of the pandemic. It's there to, or it'll become an endemic. So it'll be there to stay now. And in this context, what is it that we can do? What is it that telecom can do to provide both sort of face-to-face communications like telepresence or whatever it's doing, but also provide access, affordability, and different ways of meeting your livelihood needs. I'll stop here, but thank you, TV and the team, and Rajat in absentia for having me on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Rajit Kathurya. That was an excellent talk with giving a lot of pointers and food for thought for what we need to do going forward on various areas, including connectivity, telecom policy, spectrum assignments, etc., etc. Plenty to think about. Thank you once again. Couldn't thank you enough. With these few words, I would now move on to the next part of our program. And I have the exclusive privilege and honor to invite the chief guest of our program today, which is Mr. Shri Hari Ranjan Rao, Administrator, USOF, Department of Telecommunications, Ministry of Communications, Government of India. Before I invite Shri Hari Ranjan Rao to deliver the keynote address, I would like, ladies and gentlemen, to give a short profile of Shri Hari Ranjan Rao. Shri Hari Ranjan Rao is an IAS officer of 1994 batch from Madhya Pradesh cadre. He has 26 years plus of diverse experience in the field of administration, public policy, taxation, urban development, tourism, IT, and governance reforms. He has earlier served in the Ministry of Communications as Joint Secretary Telecom, and also for a brief while was having additional charge as Additional Secretary Telecom. And he's also been the Mission Director for National Broadband Mission. Before that, he was Principal Secretary Tourism and Managing Director of the MP State Tourism Development Corporation, and as Secretary IT Government of Madhya Pradesh, wherein he introduced innovative models of e-governance and strengthened IT infrastructure for the state, including setting up of the state data center and the state wide area network, amongst many other projects. With these few words of introduction, I now hand over the floor to Shri Hari Ranjan Rao, our chief guest today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. It is indeed an honor and matter of great pleasure to be speaking here on this August gathering. I have already heard Manasi Dr. Rajit Kathurya and Saman Manzar, and of course a wonderful introduction by Mr. T.V. Ramachandran. But thankfully, I have no complaints against anyone because, in all such discourses, I am always at the receiving end because I am the DOT, I am the part of the famous whipping boy who needs to be always whipped around. And good that the recording is starting now. So something I had to say, I had said. Good. The subject is contextual and very close to everybody's heart, including mine. Having worked in the state government for 25 years in development administration, I was with the chief minister for 8 long years. So I know how digital divide in rural India can lead to distortions in the society, and therefore I somehow feel that I am very fortunate to be at the right place and at the right seat at the right time in the history. I, as Joint Secretary in Department of Telecommunication and heading its National Broadband Mission, I had large interactions, in-depth interactions with my friends in BIF as well as in ICRIAR. And I know that as far as thinking goes, as far as the policy making is concerned, I think we have not missed the bus. Our head and heart at the right place, because everybody in the government also wants the same as all of us want to ensure that the digital connectivity and inclusion remains the backbone of our policy making. Just to correct or update Dr. Rajat on the issue of National Telecom Policy, we have now NDCP 2018, which is National Digital Communication Policy, but it is nothing but Telecom Policy, version latest, whatever. And I still feel that that is a very progressive document, because the kind of goals and targets that NDCP 2018 wants to achieve are even today are very relevant to us. That does not certainly mean that we should not revisit the policy document and come up with some more updates, but still we have a way to go. Now, I will straight away come to the point of what I am doing or what government is doing and what we collectively need to ensure. As I said in the beginning, despite being the favorite whipping boy in any conversation, because USOF and BharatNet are always the most talked about projects for not having been delivered. But I want to give all of you a comfort that at least we have been able to understand why things did not go the way they were originally envisaged. See, first and foremost, the way our telecommunication network in India is laid out, this gap in the middle mile of connectivity, unfortunately, nobody else is going to do it except the government. So whether we beat it, whether we dislike it, this will have to be the way forward. This is what I have concluded. Because, all the private telecom players, government telecom players, the good network part of it in the country is in the urban conglomerate, urban areas. And the investment needed to reach out to the rural area is so humongous that nobody is willing to bite that bullet. So it will have to be the government. Whether we look in terms of rural road projects, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, somebody had to have the vision that no, we will lay the roads right up to every village, irrespective of whether it's a viable proposition, whether it will be a financially, economically viable model. When you want to take infrastructure to the last mile, governments do not have to worry about returns, because returns come through the other means of economic development and the social integration of those regions. Similarly, now we talk about Har Ghar Nal Se Jal Yojana and water supply to every household we're talking about. So if the Honorable Prime Minister talks about broadband to every household, I think we need to live up to his expectation that as a nation, we need to reach a place where every household should have a right to tap the broadband and get the same level of internet access, which all of us in cities are having. And to be able to fulfill that dream, we need to have a network which is going to run. And that will have to be BharatNet as of now, unless and until we have some very, very major shift in the thinking and policy making. Money will have to still come from the government. And that is where USO will have to play a role. And I am, to that extent, humbled and feel honored that I am now going to play that role to best of my abilities. So what are we doing now? BharatNet, as you know, was supposed to reach 2.5 lakh gram panchayats, and we have reached 0.74 lakh gram panchayats, not 2.5 lakh still. And Honorable Prime Minister has announced that each and every 6 lakh villages will now have to have optical fiber connectivity and broadband. So suddenly my task has become threefold, and the resources and the planning remains the same. So we have to go back to the drawing board and see how this is possible in a much shorter time. But before we reach to that conclusion, this should not remain an only infrastructure laying project, because at so many other occasions, very political leaders and experts have said that this project should not be like taking electricity connection to every household and then not knowing when to switch on the light or not knowing when to connect the bulb to the electric line. Similarly, another equally important or relevant example could be to take water pipeline to every household and not provide for the taps. So first change in thinking that at BharatNet we are making is that we would not like this network to be only a network laying project, but to utilization project. Unless and until citizens are able to use the BharatNet infrastructure for their digital integration, the service of no good use to anyone. Now, once you start thinking on those lines, the concept of a service-ready Gram Panchayat gets fizzled out, because service-ready Gram Panchayat is a word coined by us in government to say that the Gram Panchayat is ready, lit. It's like saying that there is a pipeline available in every house. Water, sorry, we have not planned for water as yet, but pipeline is ready. So I don't want to get into that trap. So what I want to say is that it should be the internet-ready connection available to the household. If that jigsaw puzzle is not solved, then we are still not there. So this time we have gone to the drawing board, and I am working on a model whereby connectivity to every household should be possible. But there are challenges. On its own, it is not becoming a viable model. India is a very peculiar market in rural areas, especially where you have 4G connectivity in almost 99% of the villages, and people are able to get such cheap data of 4G that at 200 rupees per month, they are able to get access to 4G connectivity. Now to provide fiber and high-speed optical fiber-based broadband connection, we call it FTTH, at a competitive rate is something which no private sector or no entrepreneur has been able to dare to touch that, because then the viability gap is too wide for anyone to take that dip. I mean, somebody with a very deep pocket could plan that, okay, today I will start giving rural broadband connectivity to every household, and I will in any case recover over a period of 10, 20 years. The way it is being planned in urban areas these days. That's why the data rates are very, very low, artificially low. But in rural, that somehow doesn't happen. So what do we do? So now the thinking that is going on at USOF level is that we should also think in terms of planning a scheme so that that last mile connectivity can also be plugged through a viability gap funding. So that if we are able to take the network right to the villages, going to the household should also be possible. So this is one story that needs to be weaved. Second issue, which is a much bigger challenge, has been that laying a network is easier. Keeping that network up and running with a very high uptime is the bigger challenge. Unfortunately, broadband is not like water supply, where you get 2 hours of water supply in the morning or 1 hour in the evening, and that's all because you fill up all your pots and you are ready to go. No, in broadband, you need to have continuous uninterrupted supply. And if it doesn't work, then people lose trust. no village level entrepreneur can dare to provide broadband connection to customers, charge them, and then not provide them uninterrupted broadband connection. Now, that is where my second bigger challenge of keeping the network up and running comes into picture. We have identified the reasons for this loophole, and it's kind of a chicken and egg story, because if you have customers at the other end, you are forced, or you are very highly accountable to keep the network up and running, because there will be people asking questions. If there are no users, it doesn't make a difference. So we need to have both of them in place, have a good network up and running, as well as have large number of customers ready to use the network, and then point out in case the network goes down. So these are the two major items or areas of concern which we wish to address now. And third, which is again a peculiar problem of India, is that thinking that every house or every village in the country will have only an optical fiber cable is again trying to stretch the imagination too much. We need to look for alternative technologies as well. You know, when I'm doing my homework these days, and I'm pretty busy these days because I have to go to the cabinet very soon with all the alternative models. Out of 6 lakh villages, almost 1/3 of the villages in the country are having a population of less than 300 or 500. Can you imagine, for a small village of say 100 population, if I have to lay 40 kilometers of optical fiber, somehow it doesn't make sense. But the villagers do not need to suffer, because there are technologies available. There is radio technology, there is FSOC, and there are multiple other technologies where for a smaller population, very good quality, high speed bandwidth of internet is available. It's just that we need to integrate all such models of last mile delivery into our scheme of things. We are doing it now. We are not becoming fussy about only underground optical fiber cable. It could be aerial. In northeastern region, in hilly region, there is no point digging trenches. You can't take from one hill to another hill by digging trenches. You'll have to take it through the aerial route. So mix of technology, mix of alternatives, and ensuring that all the 3-4 challenges in the entire scheme of things get addressed independently is the way forward. But as they say, it's proof of the pudding is in eating. If we are able to do all this and citizens are benefited, then only I can take the credit for all this planning. Otherwise, plannings have never been in shortfall. It's the execution which has been the challenge in India. On the front of execution, some credit to my team, my friends in Kriya. We try to do something called broadband readiness index. Then we worked on right of way awareness. I'm happy to share that right of way related awareness has certainly gone up in the country in the last 2 to 3 years. Despite having all the hiccups of COVID related restrictions, the understanding has gone up, and local bodies and state governments have become very, very active and proactive in ensuring that last mile right of way related challenges are no more there, or are lesser, to say in a polite manner. I feel that we have reached a very interesting point in the history of the country when government is committed. From political point of view, this could have been the best vision we could have had. Every household should have a broadband connection. What else do we need? Resources are never have been a challenge for such good things, and there is willingness in the bureaucracy, in the department. Now, what kind of, and the private sector is upbeat, just that they want that their viability gaps should be taken care of, because you don't expect a private sector entrepreneur to deep dive into an area where there are so many uncertainties and there are so many challenges in terms of being able to make some profits out of it. So we need to plug all these individual challenges into one larger picture, and then get going, get cracking in right earnest. And I have somehow great faith and hope in the ability of the Indian ingenuity and the entrepreneurship of our people to be able to find best solutions to the most complex problems of this world. So there is no reason why this can't be done. This will be done. It's just that we could have done it slightly better 10 years back. But then there are always better ways of doing things. So keeping all that in mind, I would like to leave this forum at a very optimistic note that digital inclusion in rural area is not a utopia. It is not a topic of discussion only in the conferences. It has to go down to the reality on the ground, and it will be done because there is a team which is very clear on its roadmap and focus. That we all need to be remain together in taking this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this excellent presentation and excellent talk, sir, and lots of takeaways for people like us, sir. We wanted to assure you on behalf of Broadband India Forum that we support the government, we support you and your department, sir, in all your initiatives. And sir, we also, from our side, have also been talking about alternate technologies to reach to the rural masses, including radio technologies, which includes the likes of FSOC, includes the like of E and V band, satellite communications. So we believe that there is a role for every single alternate middle mile technologies like these to support optical fiber in taking broadband to each and every village or to each and every household as per the vision of the Honorable Prime Minister. Thank you very much, sir, for your excellent talk, sir. With this, now we move to forward in our program. I would now have the pleasure of inviting Dr. S.N. Gupta to give the concluding remarks and the vote of thanks. Before I hand over the floor to Dr. S.N. Gupta, Dr. S, I would like to introduce to him, I would like to introduce him to the audience. Is the chairman of the Bharat IPv6 Forum and treasurer of Broadband India Forum. Besides that, he's also the chairman of Bluetown and also of DigiGao. A brief introduction further to that. Dr. Gupta is an international expert in NGN technologies, next generation network technologies, regulation, interconnection, and broadband with over 40 years of experience. He's popularly known as NGN Guru, author of the book, an excellent book called Long Tail, Walking Extra Mile on Rural Broadband Business. He's the first Indian recipient of IPv6 Hall of Fame 2019, and he's also the chairman of India IPv6 Council. He has earlier served in the Ministries of Communications and Railways and TRAI. With these few words of introduction, I would now hand over the floor to Dr. S.N. Gupta to give the concluding remarks first and then followed by the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Debu, and good afternoon, everyone. It's indeed a great privilege for me.
Dr. Gupta.
Yes, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you, but the voice is coming and going a little.
Can you hear me, please, Debu?
Your connection seems to be a little...
Actually, we can hear him very well. Actually, Debu,
can you hear me,
Debashish, your voice is actually
hello.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can you hear me, Debu?
Yeah, I can hear. We can all hear you. I think Debu has got a problem at his end. Please
hello,
proceed.
can you hear
SN.
me, Debu?
Yeah. SN, please proceed.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, you can hear you. We can hear you.
Hello.
SN?
Yeah, can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for this confusion. It's great honor and pleasure for me to offer the concluding remarks on this, and for that I'm really thankful to our President TV Saab and also Debu for this generous introduction again and again. And it has been, of course, a great learning experience for me, starting from what our President, Dr. TV started with, and then Dr. Mansi, then our friend Osama, and Professor Rajat. Everyone actually have repeatedly clarified what is required for the rural digital communities to be made smarter or inclusive. And that is everything. I think that part does not need any conclusion, because they were so clear and everything was said what was required, including the policy intervention what was required. But I'll actually like to take opportunity, or almost seize the opportunity, for the presence of our chief guest, Shri Hariranjan Rao Sahab, IAS, USOF administrator, and who actually have done the job of everything, actually bringing the challenges and finding their solution and concluding also. So nicely he has put the problem in its perspective and also provided the solution. And not only the solution, about his own commitment, as well as the government commitment and roadmap and planning there, how to do that. So taking that as a background, I like to really now proceed that what, as our forum, Broadband India Forum, our members and our committee, the Rural Digital Initiative Committee, actually will like to add on to what has been brought out by the report, which is to the mark, and also what the Honorable Chief Guest Rao has already mentioned, actually. So as TV Saab, the President, was also mentioning about the Honorable Minister speech of yesterday, where he mentioned, regretfully, of course, that 60,000 villages of the country, what to talk of broadband or connectivity or inclusivity, don't have even the voice connection. Actually, they have no connectivity of any kind, actually. So that should be our, I think, the starting point of how we should prioritize our efforts of the industry, of the private sector, of the government, and especially of the USO fund, actually. So instead of solving all the problem of 6 lakhs villages, and as the Chief Guest himself mentioned, out of 6 lakhs villages, 95% of the villages actually have some kind of connectivity, even data connectivity, even 4G they have. Only thing is, it is not affordable at some places. Many places it is affordable, but some places it is not affordable, but it is there. So why to solve a problem which is not there? According to me, if you have the infrastructure or the access in place, let the market forces decide and find out a way of how to make it useful. But about the 60,000 villages which the minister mentioned, there this thing is not there. They are the balance 10% of the country geography and country population. So if all of us can actually concentrate there on those 10% of the market, of the geography, of the population, I think we can really solve the problem, actually, for everything, because of the limited resources which the Chief Guest mentioned. Let's concentrate on just one-tenth, and that is the main problem to be solved. Where what to talk of application, what to talk of usage, the access, the infra itself is not there. So if we can do that, and for that, Chief Guest have already mentioned about what they are planning to do, their work on that. 2-3 things, and that is from my own experience, I like to mention. Actually, USO fund, who has to provide viability gap funding, as for the law also, as for their structure, and that is their main job, actually, to provide viability gap funding. But the process, what they use actually, and the, let us say, the procurement process. Normally, they have been procured till now, the procuring as the equipment, as the network, and that they follow the process. There are a lot of limitations. They have to go through an open tender, limited to only the operator, only the service provider, because it is their money they are using. And then it becomes very, very limited actually as a competition. And then they buy it not as a service, but as a network or as a product. So ideal thing, that is the way these days, everything should be done as a service. Even the procurement should be done as a service. Even the network which have to be required to solve last mile problem, that can be bought as a service, because ultimately end game is, as the chief guest mentioned, not to make it just service ready, but the service has to be delivered. The application have to be delivered or motivated. So far, when you procure, when you spend the hard-earned money through your tenders, you, instead of buying the equipment, the network, the towers, the base station, the fiber, you buy this service. You say that this is the service you have to provide to my end user, the villagers, and let me know what you need for that, how much money you need for that. And there is a model working like Professor Rajat as well as Osama, and there was a debate about state center overlap. Actually, it is not either or now. And at least in telecom, it is not either or. It is both state and center. So we are already doing, and that is what leads to public-private partnership, joint venture, collaboration, all that. Actually, already having like my own project, which was thankfully mentioned by Ansi, also Blue Town. I'm doing the project in a G2G actually. So it is the government, BSNL and RailTel. So they are my partner on the provision side. And I'm selling the service to the end user, but through the state government. It is a G2G. The state government is actually buying it on behalf of their own users. And this is going to the schools also, the hospitals. Actually, it was mentioned about the schools. Actually, I'm working in the state called Bihar, where all the primary health center have been given to us by the Honorable Chief Minister to be provided with the Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi is provided just because there was no supply of even broadband connection. So the Chief Minister was given to understand, if you ask for Wi-Fi, it will also bring the broadband connection, because that is the basic requirement. And that is how we are going there actually. And same thing he wants to do for school also, all the schools. So that is what, so state government is already there. Their partnership is there. Their buying in is there, and actually they are paying, and they are paying for the usage, not for the equipment. The infrastructure or most of the capital expenditure USO fund is doing. But ultimately, for actually someone has to pay for the service also. Everything cannot be paid by USO fund. Actually, it's just a viability gap funding. Everything cannot be done by them unless they buy it as a service, so that it can be delivered to the end user. So that is what these concepts are already there, and they can be done, because it is, instead of just buying as a network and you make it network up and running, but keeping it up and running. And that is also chief guest have brought out. First, you have created the network. You have spent all your money in creating the network, laying fibers, creating towers and these BTS, and then who does? It does not keep working itself. There is a technology required, manpower required, expenditure required. As a thumb rule, 10% of your capex per year has to go for O&M. So that is additional money. Who brings that? And that has been lacking till now in the BharatNet project also. And not only BharatNet project, it is lacking even in a government telco, BSNL also. They can create the network by getting some funding, but O&M is not there. So why not to buy it end to end as a service, which includes the delivery, creation of the network, O&M, even monetization, everything is included there. So that is the way forward actually, and it is already working. In addition, and because chief guest is listening, so I will like also to mention about this technology neutrality thing actually. Your tender, Rao Sahab, USO fund tender, normally they specify a technology. Till last year, they were specifying 2G actually. as a technology which does not support the broadband for your USO funding. So now, of course, they've changed it to 4G also. And so this technology love for the procurer or the government is a dangerous thing. And the regulator as well as government have been on record that we will not talk about the technology. But then why, when you buy the system, why you specify the technology? Actually, that is what is creating a lot of problem. The cost, actually, I'm seeing in the paper, the cost of a tower, what you are creating through tender, is about 1.5 crore Indian rupee. Tower in a village funded by USO fund, 1.5 crore rupees, because you specify some technologies which are either very, very expensive, or they are so obsolete that they are more expensive than the latest thing. Because, and that is the risk or danger of specifying a technology. So instead of that, if you make it technology neutral, the same service, same outcome can be derived by 1/6 of a cost, like out of 1.5 CR, it can be done in 25 lakhs. If you leave the technology option to the provider, to the vendor, or to the solution provider, or to the operator, to whomsoever you give the job. So he will decide the most efficient technology. He will decide the most, you can zoom in technology, most efficient. And with that, the cost also goes down. And then these, of course, you have already talked about the alternate technology. So if you become technology neutral, alternate technology will find their way. Otherwise, they can never find their way, because as a
I think we lost him.
Looks like we've lost Mr. Gupta.
Yeah, I think that's.
There's a little break. Sorry. Just reach out to him, sir.
Yeah, please. I think it's almost at the end. He has to finish because you're already running beyond time. Just check this.
Dr. Gupta is back. Over to you, sir.
SN, I think you better wind up now. Time is.
Oh, yes. I'm very sorry, TV7, for this disconnection. Actually, whatever I wanted to put is already there. And I'm really thankful to our chief guest, Mr. Hariranjan Raoji, for not only making his presence, but also educating us on what they are doing. And actually, we found him, he already knows it. He knows it all, actually. And that is very, very heartening. And we are with you, Rao, we as BIF and all our members. And as was brought out very clearly, you have to make use of the private, not only their money, actually money, of course, only you have, and you have to put it, but our expertise, our what is called our innovativeness, actually. So all those things, it can be a deadly combination. You have the money, you have the vision, and we have the expertise, which unfortunately you may not have because you are already short of the resources. Your work has been increased. So why don't you make use of like ICRIER, like BIF, industry at large, and wherever, because it partnership has to be complementary to each other. And state government partnership, you yourself have told, and it has to be made use of. So thanks a lot, Mr. Rao, for your presence, for your so many ideas you have put, and we will be with you. We will like to be involved whatever way you want us. Thanks a lot. We are, of course, thankful to our friend, Professor Rajat, also. As usual, he also brings new ideas because he has been there and now he is in a different position, and for sparing his time. And our friend Osama Manjarji, he always brings the new idea. So that is more like a devil's advocate thing, but both are required. So it is nothing is either or when we talk of India. Everything is required. So even inclusiveness needs exclusiveness also. So state center government needs state government also. In India, everything is and. Nothing is either or. So that is the message we got from Osama ji also. And Mansi, of course, you are the master of ceremony here. You have really brought out the report in such a concise manner, and especially the Maryland framework also, these access application thing, and it is really good. But yes, we have to work more on that actually, and to make it happen. So with that, I'm really thankful to all of you, and also for your patient listening, and thanks a lot for the Broadband India Forum Secretariat, especially Debu and his team, and also our President TV Saab for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. With this, we come to a close. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye and have a nice day.
Thank you.